The last gift. The wind howled through the barren, alien landscape. The human, a lone explorer named Jack, had wandered far from his ship, drawn by an old signal. He was a man on a mission, one that he had no idea would change his life forever. For weeks, Jack had been searching for something that could explain the strange energy readings he'd discovered on his ship's scanner. He had heard rumors of lost alien technology hidden in the far reaches of space, but he never thought it would lead him here, to this remote planet covered in ice and rock. Now, standing at the edge of a massive, ancient structure, he had no idea what he was about to uncover. The doors of the structure were strangely intact, a marvel in itself. Jack's eyes narrowed in disbelief as he stepped inside. The air inside was cold but fresh, unlike anything he had ever felt. His boots echoed on the stone floor as he made his way deeper into the chamber. There were no lights, no signs of life. Just silence. The walls were covered in strange symbols that Jack couldn't understand. Still, he felt compelled to keep moving forward. He approached the center of the room. There, lying motionless on a raised platform, was an alien figure, its skin a pale, almost translucent blue. It was unlike anything Jack had ever seen before. The creature was tall, thin, and had long limbs, yet its face was covered by a helmet-like structure, making it impossible to tell what its features looked like. Jack's heart raced as he cautiously approached. The alien didn't move. For a moment, Jack wondered if it was dead. But something deep inside him told him that it wasn't. The faintest glow began to pulse from the alien's chest. Jack leaned closer, noticing a small compartment on the side of the platform. It seemed to be some sort of medical device, and as he studied it, he realized it was designed to keep the alien alive. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind. It wasn't a voice he could hear with his ears, but something deeper, inside his head. The language was foreign, but the meaning was unmistakable. "Human, you have come." Jack's breath caught in his throat. The alien was speaking to him, directly into his mind. Who are you?" Jack whispered, still in disbelief. The alien's eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly as they locked onto Jack's. For a moment, they both stared at each other in silence, neither knowing what to say. Then the alien spoke again, the words sharp but laced with sadness. "I am Kellera, the last of my people. My time is short. I have a gift for you." Jack didn't know what to think. A gift. This alien, dying on the brink of extinction, was giving him something. It made no sense. But as he stood there, gazing at the creature, he felt a strange pull, a connection that he couldn't explain. Kellera's hand, weak and trembling, reached out to him. Jack instinctively took it, though he wasn't sure why. A strange warmth flowed through him, and with a sudden shock, something burned into the skin of his palm. Jack pulled his hand back quickly, staring at the mark now etched into his flesh. "Yours," Kellera whispered. "It is a bond. A mark. My people, we have foreseen this. You must protect them. They are now yours." Jack stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. What did the alien mean? Protect who? The creature's body trembled, and Jack watched in shock as Kellera's life force seemed to drain away. His glowing eyes dimmed, and his body went still. The alien was gone, leaving Jack standing in the middle of the cold room, trying to process what had just happened. But the strangest part was the mark. The burning sensation on his palm had faded, leaving behind a strange symbol. It was an intricate, swirling design that seemed to shift when Jack looked at it. What did it mean? And why had the alien given it to him? Jack glanced around the room, his mind racing. He felt like he was missing something, like there was a bigger purpose to all of this. But the room offered no answers. The silence around him was deafening. Then Jack heard a sound, faint at first, but unmistakable. The sound of movement. His eyes snapped to the corner of the room, where he saw two figures standing, motionless. They were women, alien women. Their features were elegant and sharp, their skin a pale greenish hue, their eyes wide and luminous. They were staring at him, unblinking, and though they didn't speak, he could feel their gaze, as if they were sizing him up. The air around them seemed to hum with power. Jack could sense that these were not ordinary beings. One of the women stepped forward, her movements graceful, almost like she was floating. The other remained still, her gaze intense and unyielding. They didn't speak, but Jack could feel a strange energy building between them, a connection that was impossible to ignore. But what had Kelra meant? What was this gift? And why had the alien chosen him? Jack didn't have time to think about it. His heart raced as the alien women continued to stare at him. He felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the situation didn't feel right. There was danger here, danger he couldn't yet understand. The alien mark on his palm began to glow faintly, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed forever. Alien wives. The silence in the chamber felt heavy, almost suffocating. Jack could hear his own heartbeat, thumping in his chest. His mind raced with confusion. What had just happened? Why were these two alien women here? And what was the strange gift Kelra had spoken of? He couldn't shake the feeling that everything was connected. But how? The woman who had stepped forward, her skin a pale, luminous green, and her long silver hair flowing like water, didn't speak. She simply regarded Jack with intense, searching eyes. It was as if she was trying to understand him, or perhaps waiting for him to make the first move. The second woman, taller and with dark purple skin, remained still in the corner. Her eyes, darker and more mysterious, never left Jack's form. There was a strange, almost imperceptible power around her, like the calm before a storm. Jack stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. He felt that the room itself was holding its breath, as if the entire place was waiting for something. Then, the pale green woman stepped closer to him, her movements graceful, almost otherworldly. There was something in her gaze that made Jack feel both nervous and oddly safe at the same time. "Who are you?" Jack finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he had to know. The green-skinned woman's lips parted slightly as if she was considering the question carefully. "I am Salith. I am the last of my kind. Or so I thought," she said, her voice smooth, yet tinged with sadness. "We were kept here, in this place, waiting for a time when we would be free." Jack's brow furrowed. Free? From what? Zelith took a slow breath. From the war that destroyed us. From the hunters that took everything from us. Her eyes flickered to the other woman in the corner, and then back to Jack. "But now we are here. With you." Jack's eyes widened. He looked down at the mark on his palm, glowing faintly. It pulsed, like it was alive, responding to something. Zalith noticed his gaze and nodded. "The mark you bear was placed there by our people, by Kelra. It binds you to us now," she continued, her voice softening. "It means you are our protector. You are our new hope." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Protector? Hope? He had no idea how to protect anyone, let alone two alien women with powers he couldn't even begin to understand. But before he could say anything, the purple-skinned woman in the corner spoke. "Hope," she scoffed, her voice cold and distant. "He's nothing but a human. What makes him think he can save us?" Salith's gaze hardened at the words. "You are mistaken, Kendra," she said sharply. "Kelra chose him for a reason." The woman named Kendra stepped forward, her tall figure looming in the dim light. "And what reason is that?" she asked, her voice dripping with suspicion. "He's just a man, a fragile human. I see nothing in him that proves he can do anything for us." Jack felt a sudden surge of frustration. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't some powerful being. He was just Jack, an explorer with no real purpose. But the alien mark on his hand burned hotter, and his heart began to race. "I don't know why Kelra chose me," Jack said, his voice stronger now. But I know one thing. I don't leave people behind. If you want my help, you'll get it." Kendra's expression softened to just a little. "You think you can save us from what? From the hunters who will come for us? From the destruction that's left in our wake?" Jack didn't answer immediately. He knew the odds were against them. He knew that they were outnumbered, and whatever force had been chasing these women wasn't going to let them go easily. But there was something in Kendra's eyes, a quiet pain, and something inside Jack pushed him to try. No one else was going to help these women, and maybe, just maybe, he could do something. "There's got to be a way to fight back," Jack said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We'll figure it out." Kendra gave him a long, hard look before turning away. "We don't need your false promises, human. You'll soon see that this is bigger than you." Zelith stepped forward again, placing a hand on Jack's arm. "Ignore her," she said softly. "She is afraid. We all are. But you are our only chance now." Jack swallowed hard. His mind was racing with thoughts of how to protect them, but the feeling of unease was growing stronger. Something about Kendra's words had struck a chord with him. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man caught in the middle of something much bigger than himself. The mark on his hand glowed brighter, and Jack felt a wave of energy surge through his body. It was like a call, a beckoning to something he couldn't see but could feel. His fingers tingled, and his chest tightened. Whatever the mark meant, it was more than just a symbol. It was power. "We must leave this place," Zelith said, her voice urgent now. "The hunters are coming. We must find safety." Jack nodded. He had no idea how to protect them, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stay here, not with whatever was hunting them drawing closer. As they made their way toward the exit, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, it was far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. But he had no choice now. He had to protect Zelith and Kendra. He had to find a way to survive. Secrets of the dying alien. The journey out of the ancient chamber had been far from easy. Jack felt like he was walking in a fog, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. The alien women, Zelith and Kendra, led the way, moving with a quiet urgency. Their eyes darted to every corner, as if they were expecting danger to jump out at any moment. The tension in the air was thick, and Jack could feel it in his bones. Something was coming, something that wouldn't stop until they were all dead. As they walked, the mark on Jack's hand pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat of its own. It had been quiet at first, but now it seemed to be reacting to the alien surroundings, the alien technology that hummed beneath their feet. Jack couldn't explain it, but he could feel the power growing inside him, like the mark was awakening something deep within. Eventually, they'd reached the control room of the alien ship. It was a large open space, with walls covered in alien symbols. Strange machines hummed in the background, their glowing lights flickering as if they were alive. The room was eerily silent, save for the distant hum of the ship's engines. Zelith moved toward a console in the center of the room, her fingers brushing over the smooth surface. She seemed to be looking for something, her eyes narrowing in concentration. Kendra stood by the door, watching Jack closely. Her gaze was intense, like she was weighing him, deciding if he was truly someone she could trust, or if he was just another obstacle in their way. Jack approached Zelith cautiously. "What are you looking for?" he asked, trying to break the silence. Zelith didn't look up as she answered. "A way to understand the gift Kelra gave you," she said softly. "A way to unlock its full potential." Jack frowned. "A gift? But Kelra's dead. What kind of gift could he give me?" Zelith paused, then glanced at Kendra before turning back to Jack. "The gift was not just the mark," she said, her voice serious. "It's a key to understanding what happened to us, to our people. And most importantly, it's the key to saving us." Jack stared at her, unsure if he understood. "You mean, this mark on my hand is supposed to save you?" "Yes," Zelith said. "The mark you bear is more than just a symbol. It's connected to something much bigger. It's a connection to the power of my people, the power that we lost when the hunters came. She turned to the console again, her fingers moving quickly over the strange buttons. Kelra knew that we needed someone who could unlock that power. But why me? Jack asked, still feeling lost. I'm just a human. I don't know anything about alien power or war. Zelith paused, her fingers hovering over the console. That's the thing, Jack, she said softly. You're not just a human. You were chosen because of something inside you. Your ancestors, they were part of a war, part of a larger battle that our people have been fighting for centuries. The mark on your hand is a part of that battle. It connects you to our people's past. Jack felt a strange shiver run down his spine. The idea that his ancestors might have been connected to this alien war was almost too much to believe. But the more he thought about it, the more sense it made. The mark, the energy, the strange feeling of connection to these women. It was all linked somehow. But how? Before Jack could ask another question, a loud alarm sounded throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, casting an eerie glow on everything around them. Zelith's face hardened in an instant. They found us, she whispered. The hunters. They know we're here. Kendra turned quickly, her eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. We need to leave. Now. Jack's heart raced as the reality of their situation hit him like a punch to the gut. They were being hunted. They weren't safe, not here, not anywhere. He had to protect them. But how? What could he possibly do against an enemy that had wiped out an entire alien race? Zelith moved quickly to a small panel on the wall, pressing a few buttons. The ship groaned in response, and the floor beneath them seemed to shift. Suddenly, the room was plunged into darkness. Get to the escape pods, Zelith ordered, her voice calm but urgent. We don't have much time. Jack didn't hesitate. He followed Zelith and Kendra through the dark hallways of the ship, his mind racing. The hunters were coming. He didn't know who they were, what they were, or how they had tracked them down. But one thing was clear. They were dangerous. And Jack was now in the middle of something he didn't understand. A battle he wasn't ready for. They reached the escape pods, small, cramped ships that could take them away from the main ship. Zelith quickly activated one of the pods, and the door slid open with a hiss. Get in, she said. Hurry. Jack climbed into the pod, followed by Kendra, who looked at him one last time with an unreadable expression. Zelith sat at the controls, her fingers flying over the buttons as she worked to launch the pod. As the engines roared to life, Jack's thoughts raced. The mark on his hand pulsed again, and for the first time, he felt something. An unfamiliar sense of power. It wasn't just a connection to these women or their race. It was something more. Something ancient. Suddenly, the pod shuddered as it detached from the main ship, shooting off into the cold void of space. As they flew into the darkness, Jack looked at Zelith and Kendra. He could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on him. But there was something else now, something he couldn't explain. The mark on his hand was not just a symbol. It was a message. And he was beginning to understand that it was calling him to something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Rising tension. The escape pod sped through space, its small engines humming steadily as it cut through the cold, dark void. Jack sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the glowing console in front of him. The mark on his hand throbbed with a low, pulsing energy, growing stronger with each passing second. It was as if the alien power within him was awakening, responding to something in the vast emptiness outside the pod. Beside him, Zelith and Kendra sat quietly. Zelith, her face calm but determined, was focused on the controls, her fingers moving in quick, practiced motions. Kendra, on the other hand, stared out of the small viewport, her gaze distant, her mind clearly elsewhere. The tension between the two women was palpable, and Jack could feel the weight of it. For the past few hours, there had been no words between them. Jack didn't know what to say. He had learned so much in such a short time. About the dying alien race, the mark on his hand, and the terrifying hunters that had followed them. Yet, despite all the information he had been given, there was still so much he didn't understand. He didn't know what his role was, what was expected of him, or how to even begin protecting these two powerful alien women. The silence in the pod was broken by Kendra's voice, low and strained. "Do you really think we can outrun them?" she asked, her eyes flicking to Xalith. Her words were sharp, filled with doubt. "The hunters have never failed before. They'll find us. It's only a matter of time." Xalith didn't look at her as she spoke. "We can't outrun them, but we can hide. We can make them think we're gone." Her voice was firm, though Jack could sense the uncertainty behind her words. "But we don't have much time. The mark, it's growing stronger. Jack, we need to figure out how to use it. We need to unlock its power." Jack glanced down at his hand. The mark was glowing more brightly now, its swirling lines shifting and pulsing with an energy that felt both alien and familiar. It was as if it were calling to him, urging him to understand. But the more he tried to focus on it, the more the energy seemed to slip away, just out of reach. "I don't know how," Jack admitted, his voice tense. "It's just there. It's like it's alive. But I don't understand what it wants from me." Kendra laughed bitterly, turning her head to look at him. "You don't get it, do you, human? It's not about what you understand. You have to feel it. You have to let it guide you." Her words stung, but Jack didn't argue. Instead, he closed his eyes and tried to focus. The mark on his hand burned hotter, and for a brief moment, he felt a wave of strange energy pulse through him. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a feeling of immense power, as if the entire universe was connected to him, waiting for him to tap into it. Suddenly, a warning light on the console flashed red, breaking Jack from his concentration. His heart raced. "They found us," Xalith said quietly, her voice filled with urgency. "Prepare yourself, Jack." Jack's eyes snapped open, and he immediately began scanning the pod's controls, his mind racing. The hunters had tracked them down faster than he thought possible. How were they so close? Were they that powerful? He didn't know what they were up against, but he could feel it. Whatever was coming, it was going to be dangerous. Xalith set the pod on a new course, pulling them into a series of asteroids that littered the nearby region of space. The rocks were jagged and close together, perfect for hiding. But Jack knew that the hunters wouldn't be fooled for long. "We can't stay here," Kendra said, her voice sharp. "They'll find us." "I know," Xalith replied. "We need to find a way to use Jack's power. If we can unlock it, we might have a chance. But we don't have much time." As they maneuvered through the asteroids, Jack could feel the pressure mounting. The mark on his hand was growing hotter, and his pulse quickened with it. The sensation was almost unbearable now, the alien power pulsing through his veins, calling him to something he didn't fully understand. Suddenly, the pod jolted violently, and Jack was thrown forward, slamming into the control panel. The lights flickered, and the entire pod shook, as if something massive had just collided with them. Jack pushed himself up, eyes wide, heart pounding. "What was that?" he asked, his voice shaking. Xalith's face was grim. "They're here." Outside the viewport, Jack could see the massive silhouette of an alien ship, sleek and deadly, its surface dark as night. It hovered in the distance, but Jack could feel its presence like a weight pressing down on him. This was no ordinary ship. The hunters were here, and they were closing in. "We need to fight back," Xalith said, turning to Jack. "It's time. Use the power inside you. You have to." Before she could finish, the ship's weapons fired, and a blast of energy shot toward them. The pod shuddered again as the shields flared to life, absorbing the impact, but the force was enough to send them spiraling. Jack gripped the seat, fear spreading through him. This was it, the moment he had been dreading. But then he felt it again. The mark. It burned brighter than ever before, and with it came a sense of clarity, like everything was falling into place. He didn't know what he was doing, but he had to try. He extended his hand toward the console, focusing on the mark, on the energy surging within him. He didn't know how, but he could feel it, the power that had been waiting for him to unleash it. As he focused, the mark flared brightly, and the ship seemed to hum in response. The pod's systems started to shift. Jack felt the power flow through him, into the ship's engines, into the very fabric of the pod itself. The walls of the pod seemed to vibrate with the energy. And then, with a sudden burst of force, the pod shot forward, breaking through the asteroid field at lightning speed. The hunter ship was left behind, its weapons useless against the power Jack had unlocked. But as the pod raced through the stars, Jack knew this was just the beginning. The hunters weren't done yet. They would come for them again, and next time, they would be ready. The betrayal. The escape pod shot through the stars, its engines roaring as they left the asteroid field far behind. Jack barely had time to process what had just happened. The power inside him, the mark on his hand, it had all come together in that moment. And somehow, he had managed to save them from the hunters. For a brief moment, there was hope. But that hope was fleeting. Zalith remained at the controls, her focus sharp, but Jack could see the worry in her eyes. Kendra, who had remained silent through the entire escape, now stared at Jack, her gaze intense and unreadable. The tension between them was thicker than ever. The pod had taken them far from the hunters, but Jack knew they were far from safe. Whatever had tracked them down once would do it again. The mark on his hand had given them a small victory, but it wasn't enough to win the war. "We need to find a place to hide," Zalith said, her voice low and controlled. "Somewhere the hunters won't find us. The farther we get from their reach, the better." Jack nodded, but something felt off. He couldn't explain it, but the energy inside him was growing stronger by the minute, and it wasn't just the mark. There was something else, something deeper. As the pod flew through space, Jack noticed that Zalith and Kendra had grown increasingly distant. They no longer exchanged words or even glances. It was as if a wall had suddenly been built between them. Jack didn't know what was happening, but he felt it. The air was thick with unspoken tension. And then, as if to confirm his suspicions, Kendra spoke. "You still don't understand, do you?" she said, her voice quiet but cutting. "None of this is real. The mark, the power, it's just a tool. It's all part of a plan. A plan I've been part of for much longer than you could possibly imagine." Jack's heart skipped a beat. What was she talking about? He turned to Zalith, who had gone pale, her eyes wide with shock. "What does she mean?" Jack asked, his voice rising with disbelief. "What plan?" Zalith didn't answer right away. Her gaze flickered nervously toward Kendra, then back to Jack. For the first time, Jack saw fear in her eyes. "Kendra." Zalith began slowly. "What are you saying?" Kendra stood up from her seat, her movements slow and deliberate. "I'm saying that none of this was ever meant for you, Jack. You were never meant to be our protector. You were meant to be our tool, and you fell for it." Jack's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, tool? You said I was the one who could save you." Kendra laughed bitterly, her voice cold. "Save us? No, you're just a pawn. A piece of the puzzle we've been trying to put together for centuries. All of this, Kellera's death, the mark, you, it's all part of a plan to bring the hunters to us. To use you to lead them straight into our hands." Jack's mind spun. Betrayal. He couldn't believe it. His hand trembled, the mark still burning on his palm. He had trusted them. He had thought they were allies, that they were fighting together against a common enemy. But now, it seemed like it was all a lie. Zalith's face was pale, and she looked torn. "Kendra, you promised me." "I promised nothing," Kendra snapped, cutting her off. "I've been working with the hunters this whole time, Zalith. We needed someone to open the way, someone powerful enough to unlock the mark's true potential, And Jack was the perfect candidate. A human, weak enough to trust us, strong enough to lead us to victory. Zelith's eyes filled with shock and betrayal. You've been working with them. Kendra's gaze hardened. Yes, I've been working with the hunters for years. And now, with the mark awakened, we can finally finish what we started. The humans will be wiped out. Our enemies will fall. And we will rise to power again. Jack felt his heart sink. Everything he had fought for, everything he had believed in, had been a lie. The mark, the power, it wasn't about saving them. It was about leading him into a trap, making him a weapon for the hunters. Why didn't you tell me? Jack demanded, his voice shaking with anger. Why didn't you warn me? Kendra's eyes narrowed. Because you wouldn't have helped us then. You were a means to an end. And now, we have what we need. Jack stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had trusted Kendra, trusted them both. And now he realized that everything had been part of a plan to use him. Zelith stepped forward, her face filled with pain. Jack, I didn't know. I didn't know about Kendra's betrayal. I thought we were in this together. But it's not too late. We can still fight. Jack's eyes flicked between Zelith and Kendra, the weight of their betrayal pressing down on him. Kendra was cold, calculating, while Zelith seemed genuinely sorry. But Jack knew one thing for sure now. He couldn't trust either of them. You both have your own agendas, Jack said, his voice firm. But I'm done being part of your plan. I'm not your pawn. Zelith's eyes filled with sorrow. Jack, please. But Jack turned away. He didn't want to hear her apologies. The mark on his hand burned hotter now, its power coursing through him. It was no longer just a symbol. It was his, and it was time he started using it for his own purpose. As he made his way to the control panel, he glanced back at Zelith and Kendra, both standing silently in the dim light of the pod. The hunters would come soon, and when they did, Jack would be ready. He would fight for himself. The final battle. The escape pod sped through space, its engines screaming as it tore through the blackness. The betrayal weighed heavily on Jack's mind. He had trusted Zelith and Kendra, believed in their mission. But now, he was alone in a ship full of lies. His thoughts were a whirlwind, spinning with anger, confusion, and betrayal. Yet, in the midst of all the chaos, one thing was clear. He couldn't afford to keep playing the role of the pawn. It was time to fight back. The mark on his hand pulsed again, its fiery glow lighting up the dark interior of the pod. Jack could feel its power growing stronger with every passing second, urging him to act, to take control of his own destiny. He had no idea how to fully unlock its potential, but he was ready to try. The hunters were coming, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. Behind him, Zelith sat in silence, her face a mask of regret, while Kendra's eyes were cold, calculating, as always. Jack could feel the tension between them all, thick and suffocating. But he couldn't afford to be distracted by them anymore. The real enemy was out there, closing in. We're not safe yet, Kendra said, her voice sharp, breaking the silence. They know we're here. The hunters will find us. Zelith glanced at Jack, her eyes pleading. We need to work together, Jack. Please, the power inside you, it's the only chance we have. We need to unlock it fully. Jack turned to face them, his gaze hardening. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore, he said, his voice firm. You've lied to me. You used me. But I'm done. I'm not your weapon, and I'm not your pawn. Kendra's lips curled into a slight smile, but it wasn't one of amusement. It was one of victory. You'll regret this, human. You think you can fight the hunters alone. They'll tear you apart. The pod jolted, pulling Jack's attention back to the outside. The ship's sensors were going wild. Something was out there. Something big. Jack could feel the threat, the dark presence closing in on them. He could almost hear the hunters' cold, calculating minds tracking them. Zelith's voice cut through his thoughts. We can't run anymore. We have to fight." "I know," Jack said, his hands clenched around the controls. "But first, I need to know how to use this power. I need to understand what the mark really is." Kendra's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of uncertainty passing through her eyes. "You think you can control it," she said, her tone doubtful. "The power is too much for you. You're nothing but a weak human. The hunters are coming, and they won't show mercy." Jack's gaze remained steady. "Maybe. But I'm not waiting to die. Not anymore." The mark on his hand burned brighter, sending a wave of energy through him. It was as if the power inside him was finally responding to his will. Jack closed his eyes, trying to focus. The energy flooded his body, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. He could feel the ship's systems, the energy fields surrounding him, all pulsing in time with the mark on his hand. "Come on. Come on," he whispered, willing the power to rise up inside him. Suddenly, the entire pod shuddered. The view outside the window shifted, and Jack saw it. A massive alien ship, sleek and menacing, its weapons aimed directly at them. "They're here," Zalith whispered. "The hunters." The pod rocked again, and Jack felt a wave of fear rush through him. The ship was firing at them, its weapons slicing through the void with deadly precision. But Jack didn't panic. Instead, he let the power inside him take over. The mark on his hand burned with intensity, and suddenly, the pod's shields flared to life, glowing with a new, unfamiliar energy. The ship's weapons hit, but the shields held, absorbing the energy. Jack gritted his teeth and pushed harder. The energy inside him surged again, and the ship responded. The pod's engines roared as Jack sent them into overdrive, maneuvering them around the hunter ship with impossible speed. The hunter ship fired again, but this time, Jack was ready. He focused, his mind locked onto the ship's systems. The mark on his hand pulsed with power, and with a flick of his wrist, he sent a surge of energy back toward the enemy ship. It was a blast of raw energy, more powerful than anything he had ever felt before. The hunter ship shuddered as the blast hit, its shields flickering. "That's it," Jack muttered under his breath. He had done it. He had unlocked the power. But the battle was far from over. The hunter ship wasn't finished. It began to turn, its weapons powering up for another strike. Jack knew they didn't have much time. He needed to end this now. Without thinking, he took a deep breath and guided the pod toward the hunter ship. The mark on his hand burned brighter, its power filling him completely. He could feel the energy inside him like a second heartbeat, pulsing with the rhythm of the universe itself. Jack pushed forward, the pod racing toward the massive ship. With one final burst of energy, he reached out, tapping into the power with everything he had. The mark flared, and a wave of energy shot from the pod, this time hitting the heart of the enemy ship. The ship exploded in a flash of light and fire, its massive frame disintegrating before their eyes. The shockwave sent the escape pod tumbling. But Jack held on, gritting his teeth as the pod's systems fought to stabilize. The ship was gone. The hunters were defeated. For a moment, there was silence. Jack leaned back in his seat, his body trembling from the strain. The mark on his hand slowly faded, its glow dimming to a soft pulse. But the battle was over. The threat was gone. Kahilith and Kendra were both silent, watching Jack closely. Zalith's eyes were filled with awe and wonder, while Kendra's expression remained unreadable. "You did it," Zalith whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Jack turned to her, his face hard. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for me." And with that, Jack knew that his journey had only just begun. The mark, the power, the hunters, it was all part of something bigger. But now he was in control. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. A new beginning. The stars outside the escape pod stretched into infinity, endless and cold. Jack sat quietly, his hands resting on his lap, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened. The hunters were gone, their ship destroyed in the fiery explosion. But Jack knew this victory wasn't just about surviving. It was about something much bigger, the power inside him, the mark on his hand, and the decisions that lay ahead. The pod had drifted into deep space, far from any familiar world. They were alone, or at least that's how it felt. Kelith and Kendra sat across from him, the tension between them thick as ever. After the battle, neither woman had spoken much. Kendra's eyes were narrowed, her expression unreadable. Zalith, though, seemed lost in thought, her gaze often flickering to Jack as if she were waiting for him to say something. Anything. The silence stretched on, uncomfortable and heavy. Finally, Jack broke it, his voice calm, but firm. "So, now what?" Zalith looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and regret. "Now we try to rebuild," she said softly. "Our people, they're gone. But there's still hope. You showed us that." Kendra scoffed, her arms crossed over her chest. "Hope? You think that's enough? There's no going back. The hunters won't stop until they've destroyed everything." Jack turned to her, his gaze steady. "Maybe. But I'm not the same man who came on this journey. I've changed. The mark has changed me. And I'm not running anymore." Kendra's eyes narrowed. "You're a fool if you think you can change the outcome of this war, human. The hunters are everywhere. You may have defeated one ship, but that's just a small victory in a much larger battle." Jack stood, moving toward the control panel. His hand brushed against the console, and the familiar pulse of power surged through him once more. This time, he didn't flinch. He embraced it, feeling the energy coursing through his veins. "I'm not here to change the war," Jack said, his voice quiet but filled with resolve. "I'm here to change my fate, to take control of my own path." Zalith's eyes softened, and she stood as well, walking toward him. "I never wanted to use you, Jack. I thought I could trust Kendra, but I see now how wrong I was. You're right. This isn't just about saving us. It's about something bigger, something none of us understand." Jack turned to face her, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. "Then let's figure it out. Together." For the first time, Zalith smiled. A small, weary smile, but one full of sincerity. "I'm with you, whatever happens next." Kendra let out a sigh, uncrossing her arms. "Fine, but don't expect me to trust you. Not after what you did. We're not allies. But I'll stay for now." Jack glanced at her, unfazed. "That's all I'm asking for." The pod was silent again, but this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't a heavy, oppressive silence. It was the quiet of new beginnings, of decisions made, and paths chosen. Outside, the stars continued to burn in the cold emptiness of space. The universe was vast, full of dangers, but also endless possibilities. Jack had once been a man who didn't believe in much, certainly not in destiny, or in the idea that he could be part of something bigger than himself. But the mark on his hand, the power inside him, it had changed everything. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was something more. And it was up to him to decide what that meant. Jack moved to the cockpit, his fingers brushing over the ship's controls. He could feel the energy still coursing through him, like a pulse that matched his heartbeat. The ship's systems responded to his touch, the engines humming to life as if they were alive, powered by the strange energy he now controlled. Zalith stood beside him, her eyes filled with wonder as she watched him work. "It's amazing," she whispered. You're the key, the one we've been waiting for." Jack shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I don't know about that. But I know one thing. We can't keep running. We have to face what's coming. And we need to be ready." Kendra's voice came from behind them, sharp and direct. "You're right about one thing. We can't keep running. The hunters are out there, and they'll come for us again. But it won't be just us they're after. It'll be anyone who stands in their way." Jack turned toward her, meeting her eyes. There was something different in her gaze now, something less certain but more thoughtful. "We'll be ready, I promise." With that, Jack activated the ship's engines, setting a course toward the unknown. The universe was vast, and the dangers ahead were impossible to predict. But Jack was no longer afraid. The mark on his hand burned brightly, a constant reminder of the power he wielded. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for his future, and the future of those who would stand with him. As the ship broke free of the gravity well of the planet they had escaped from, Jack gazed out into the stars. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he would no longer be anyone's pawn. He was the one in control now. The journey had only just begun.